Hi everyone, welcome to our next daily scrum. I'm Michael from Pixeesoft, and I know that the title says, is Kubernetes the right choice? Well, let's find out. So let's start with our scrum board. As you might remember, some things have changed, some tasks have moved. Last time we talked about deployment of the auth service and also the containerization of the API service. Now, thank goodness the containerization has been very successful. It works quite well. The auth service, some of you might remember that in fact I said, I'm not quite sure if I'll be able to finish this task before the weekend, and then I might end up spending my weekend thinking about the task. And that's exactly what happened. So what is the deal? What's the problem with Kubernetes? Well, Kubernetes as a technology is pretty cool. It simplifies a lot of things and it has a lot of bells and whistles. Now, the problem with it is that if you have an app that is, let's say, quite old or is programmed in the older days of PHP, when PHP was the main framework on the back end, some of it might not be exactly suitable. Let's say that the architecture might not be completely suitable for Kubernetes. Now let me explain the problem here. So we have an app that has a backend portion and front-end portion. Both of those components are written in PHP, both the backend and the front-end. The backend is written in an in-house framework, and the front-end is written in, well, let's say quite popular Czech framework for front-end. And both of these components work quite well. They're exposed on different ports on the same machine. But unfortunately, none of those components have a default health check. Now, this is a problem for Kubernetes because the way Kubernetes works is that you have, let's say in our instance, you have a deployment, you have a service, and then you have an ingress. Now, what are all of these stages, you might ask? So deployment is your app. That's just the app. That's one of those apps that you have. You might have an auth service, API, you might have a billing service, whatever you have you. But let's say that our auth service is one deployment. And this auth service, or this auth backend, exposes two ports. One port for front end, one port for the API, if some other apps want to call it. And the problem is that both of these ports that you expose on this deployment, they have to have a health check, usually something like /health. And it has to be a GET request, and it doesn't matter what it returns, it just has to return 200 OK. Doesn't matter if the content of the body is HTML and XML or JSON, it doesn't matter. Kubernetes just wants to have an open GET endpoint to return the health status, and there's a liveliness and readiness probe. That's how it works. Now, I exposed on the front end /user/sign-in, and on the back end, I tried to make something work. The problem is that the in-house framework by default needs some form of data to be sent in. And here is the problem. Kubernetes doesn't allow you to put data into the body of the request for the health check. Aha. So why is it a problem? So that's the deployment. The deployment reports, I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready. Then there's a service that's like an umbrella for the deployment. Then through the service, you can expose the ports. This is the front end, that's one service. Then you create another service. This is the back end, that's another service. It helps with load balancing. And then for the ingress, you combine it all together and you expose it on different URLs and /something else /something. Basically, you take your microservice-oriented architecture and you make it into a monolith, but still having the capability of scaling up, because on the back end, the deployments can scale up and they can go one after another. Kubernetes can, or your Kubernetes provider can scale it up as you wish. You can set the limits there as you want. But the problem is that in our situation, I was unable to put the health check there in an easy way. Well, what do you mean easy way? So during our planning or even the introduction of this whole migration bonanza, I said I don't want to rewrite or I don't want to dive into the code that already exists and change it significantly. I first want to migrate to the cloud to see if it works, to see if we can migrate it easily and avoid modifying the already existing code. Because much rather I would migrate to the cloud and then take one service after another and replace it with a, let's say, fresher version. And quite honestly, having a front end act as a client server, it's not that great. I would rather have a, just standard JavaScript deployment. You have your React Vue or Angular app that sits in an S3 bucket and it gets downloaded to the client and then makes requests to the backend itself. So, long story short, Kubernetes was quite problematic. So what did we do instead? So as you can see here, the deploy auth service to a single VM has changed the definition of done a little bit. I removed the Kubernetes YAML in the repo and I just leave it out. I left it out the way it is. There's one condition that SSL have to be in place. Obviously, we're in 2019, SSL is an absolute must. So what's the plan now? If not Kubernetes, what else? Well, Google Compute Engine, GCE, has an option that you can deploy your container into a VM. Sounds good. So what's the deal? Basically, you just tell GCE, this is the container I want to deploy, and I want you to expose these ports. And even on top of that, you can tell Google, all right, I would like you to give me an SSL certificate. Aha, that's good. So how do we do that? Unfortunately, a little bit unfortunately, but it is a technical debt. You get a little vendor lock-in for this one because you have to, click, drag and drop, and you're really doing everything in the cloud console. I'm fairly sure that's what the vendor wants you to do, but I will note it down as a technical debt because it is. A vendor lock-in is a technical debt. It makes the app not portable, which is the whole premise of Kubernetes. So in fact, in the long term, I'd like to rewrite or replace the auth service so that it can be either deployed in a Kubernetes cluster or I can just put some other service and put it in place. So that's what I'll be occupying myself with today. And I think that this is fairly a half a day situation. So I'll add the deployment of the API service to the VM as well. Now, why would I manage this as well? Because I believe that once I do it for the auth service, I'll be able to replicate it much faster. So that's the plan for today. And as we always say, the stand-ups should be short, brief, and to the point. So we talked about Kubernetes, we talked about what's good and what's bad about it, but ultimately, I still really believe in that technology and I would like to, going forward, I would like to push for using it in production. All right, so that's it. Thank you for tuning in. Comment below, like or dislike if you didn't like. Maybe drop a comment. What didn't you like? Subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you tomorrow.